All right, everyone, I have that it's 2 o'clock, so I will now call the meeting of the Waco MPO Policy Board of December 17th, 2020 to order again at 2 o'clock. Chris, has this meeting been posted properly?
Yes, it was posted to the Waco MPO website on December 10th in accordance with state guidelines for socially distanced meetings. And a possible quorum of the Waco City Council was posted on December 14th.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now go through who I have down as from the policy board being present. And sorry, this is kind of like a big game of memory and it keeps moving on around. So I'll go down the list and say if I've already noted you. If I haven't seen you yet, I'll ask. So please unmute and chime in if I ask. So we have Councilwoman Bearfield as present, Jacob Bell present, Keith Bond present, Councilman Borderrood present. Is Bert Echterling on? Bert, okay, don't see him. Deidre Emerson. Okay. Kevin Evans, I just see now. Hey, Kevin. Scott Felton. Travis Gibson. Okay. I saw Ross Harris as present. Jim Holmes is present. Is Jim Jaska on? Okay. Will Jones is present. Is Dylan Meek on? Okay. Sean Ubri is present. Joseph Pace is present. Hector Sabito is present. Stan Switek is present. And is Bo Thomas on? I see you down there, Bo.
I'm on.
Okay, welcome. All right. I'm not sure. Do we have a Waco City Council quorum?
Yes, we do.
Who needs to call that meeting to into session?
I can go ahead and call it if that's okay, Jacob.
Sounds good to me. Thanks.
So I now call to order a meeting of the Waco City Council on December 17th, 2020.
Appreciate that. Okay, we'll get on into it. So as far as public hearing rules, everything is different in 2020. And I'm just going to go through a summary. And if we need more detail on anything, I'll dive into it. But basically, face-to-face meetings with public are suspended until further notice. Public comments are allowed if registered ahead of time for this meeting. Written comment cards will be read during item 2 of the agenda. Pre-registered speakers will be added to the meeting during item 2 or a public hearing of a further down the list action item. Policy board members can respond to items on agenda, but cannot respond to items if they're not on the agenda. And for the public also, not only is this, can people tune in now, but an on-demand recording of the meeting will be made available afterwards. So we'll get to item 2, public hearing regarding any discussion or action item on this agenda. Chris, do we have any pre-registered speakers?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay. Item 3 will be approval of minutes. November 19, 2020 MPO Policy Board meeting minutes should have been sent out to the board. Are there any changes or corrections to be noted by policy board members? Hearing none, those minutes will stand approved as presented. Moving on to item 4, Resolution 2020-11, Acknowledgement and Acceptance of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan for Waco Transit System and support of adopted safety targets. Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, so this actually represents the last of the various FAST Act performance targets that MPOs are and actually transit agencies are required to consider. And if we go to the next slide here in that, transit agencies that receive federal dollars are required to produce a public or a safety plan to address various operational issues that could lead to levels of risk and We want to take a look at how can we improve transit operations to minimize the risks that are inherent with operating a transit system. The PTASP, which is a mouthful, basically is also intended to try to predict future safety events, and also to identify what things the transit agency can do to reduce those. But there is an MPO role to this as well, since obviously the transit agency operates on the highway system. And so we're interested in seeing what areas can be improved to minimize those risks as well. If we'll go to the next slide here. So the current safety plan was actually adopted back in June, and MPOs do have 180 days from the time we received that plan to accept plan and accept the targets that were included in them, and then to incorporate those into our planning process. And then by the time we get to July, we'll have to actually identify how the mix of projects within our long-range transportation plan and our shorter-range transportation improvement program are intended to assist Waco Transit in accomplishing their targets. Now, a sizable portion of this plan actually deals with internal operations that really are not the purview of the MPO per se. So for instance, how do you improve the safety environment in their workshop when they're, say, changing oil for a bus? However, there are a number of things that do involve us. We're interested in the number of fatalities and serious injuries that have occurred as the transit system is operating under normal operations. We're also interested in the number of safety events. So these are everything else, like fender benders that don't necessarily involve someone being seriously hurt. And then we're also looking at significant mechanical failures that occur during the operations of the system. So we'll walk through all those in right here. Good news is there have not been, there have not been any fatalities in the last 5 years for Waco Transit, and the number of serious injuries, which these are the life-threatening type injuries, is also very, very low. We also separate out their two operations. We have the fixed route system, which most people are familiar with, but there's also a corresponding demand response system for those who are unable to use the fixed route system because of some type of disability. The good news is, since we don't have any fatalities and very few serious injuries, it's very hard to improve on that. So the targets that they adopted actually are identical on those two metrics as to what we've seen over the last 5 years. Safety events are a little bit different. Again, these include the fender benders, so there's a few more to consider here. But again, it's also a very, very low number. So those are all very good things, and we'd like to maintain those very low numbers. When we get to significant mechanical failures, however, this is where we actually see that it's a little bit higher than perhaps we would like it to see. It still results, we still have a pretty big number there, but in this particular metric, we want a larger number rather than a smaller number. And so if we go to the next slide here, so not only is this something we're going to look at annually here, but for the mechanical failure rate, for the fixed route system, over the last 5 years, we've been averaging about one failure every 5.5 days. And for the demand response system, it's one failure for every 8.5 days. That's probably more than we would like it to see. And this directly translates back to the age of the equipment that Waco Transit has been operating with over the last 5 years. The reason this is a big deal here is that anyone who's operated an older motor vehicle at any point in your life, like myself, will tell you that you can't pick and choose when the major failure is going to occur, and it always seems to occur in a very bad spot, a place where maybe you can't pull over, maybe not a safe place to offload your passengers and have them wait for the next vehicle. And of course, then the risk is that you have something much more serious occur potentially. And so the more we can reduce those mechanical failures, the more we can reduce that risk. So if you go to the next slide here, I mentioned that this is directly related to the age of the vehicles that Waco Transit is operating with until very recently. So if we go back to 2019, and these are benchmarks that you've seen previously. So one of the things that both Waco Transit and the MPO have to track is the useful life benchmark. How many vehicles is Waco Transit operating that are officially old under the FTA definition? And so 2 years ago, almost everything Waco Transit was operating with was beyond that benchmark. The good news is that over the last year, Waco Transit has introduced a lot of new vehicles into their fleet. Not just for the fixed route system, we went from half of the system being old to only 13% meeting that threshold. And then for the demand response system, it was everything back in 2019. Now it's only a fraction of those vehicles. And so we expect this one metric, which we thought was a little high, to greatly improve as we start monitoring this into the future. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. And so there are some MPO things that we can start looking at in the future as we consider the mix of projects for our plan and TIP. Obviously, we already look at the age and condition of Transit's vehicle fleet through the asset condition targets. But we also are interested in the roadway and infrastructure condition that they operate on. So we have an interest in the condition of the overall system, but we can also look at the specific facilities that Waco Transit uses for its fixed route system. So this includes pavement condition, this includes the condition of lane markings and signage, the traffic signals along those routes. And we also can do and have done already a hotspot analysis for crashes and severe crashes. And then introducing a prioritization scale for those projects that do a better job of addressing some of these concerns. And so that's something we'll be looking at between now and July. So the action that we need the policy board to consider right now is acknowledging and accepting the transit safety plan, and then support for the safety targets that they've identified for the next year. And with that, I'll be happy to address any questions the policy board might have.
Hey, Chris, this is Hector. Could you please go back to the slide where you show the safety plan?
The targets?
I'm
this
sorry.
One?
Right after this one.
Right after.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So the mechanical failure rate, how do we, in your presentation it says it's relatively high. How do we improve that?
So this is directly related to the age and condition of the vehicles that Waco Transit is operating.
So it's mainly due to how old the vehicle is.
Pretty much. And so, Annette, if you go to the next slide, this is where you can actually see that as of 2019, everything was old that they were operating with. Half of the fixed route buses and then everything they were using for the demand response system was basically the FTA definition of old. Fast forward to 2020, that now we see that only a fraction of the vehicles they're operating with meet that definition of being old. And so we fully expect a very significant improvement in those statistics next year when transit takes a look at that.
Wonderful. Thank you. That answered my question. Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions for Chris? Okay, we will move into public hearing. I will open a public hearing at 2:15 p.m. Chris, were there any registered speakers on this item?
No, sir.
Seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 2:15. If there's no other discussion or questions, then I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2020-11.
This is Holmes. So moved.
Second.
Who is that second? I'm sorry.
Deidre.
Deidre. Which, by the way, I should say I saw that Dylan Meek and Deidre Emerson did join, so they're in attendance. Okay, we'll just ask everyone to unmute here in a second and cast your vote. So everyone in favor of Resolution 2020-11 being approved, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, I'll ask everyone to mute themselves and say that this has passed. Chris, thank you very much. Let's move on to agenda item 5, discussion and updates from TxDOT regarding significant highway construction within the Waco metropolitan area. I imagine this is going to be handed over to Clayton Zacca.
Hey, Jacob.
We can barely hear you, Clayton.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I don't have any new pictures to show this month, unfortunately, so we'll go through just a normal presentation here. So through November, we have paid out around $215 million of our $350 million contract, still projecting an on-time finish. On the southbound frontage road, the majority of our work is on side streets at the south end of the job. That'd be 2nd, 4th, 8th, and 9th. We expect all of those to be reopened early part of 21. We have also closed the on-ramp around 4th Street. We expect it to reopen next week. It will then close again early next year to complete some paving in the area. On the northbound frontage road, we have placed the majority of the new pavement. We actually opened a portion of new frontage road from roughly Bellmead Drive up to North Loop through 40 this morning. So there's a good stretch of frontage road that's actually opened up now on new concrete. We are fully expecting to have the area from 17th, 18th Street all the way up to Business 77 open the early part of 2021. All right, Chris, you can go to the next slide. On the main lanes, the big push is still on southbound. All of our new bridges have been completed with the exception of US 84, our Business 77 exit ramp, and Business 77 itself. There's a chance that 84 gets poured by the end of this year, but all 3 will be done by the early part of 2021. Along with the bridges, our contractor's been building the new retaining walls from one end of the job to the other, and the vast majority are now complete. There's a big push to get permanent pavement on the ground. We actually expect that in January, they'll bring in a second crew and start running a double shift day and night to complete paving. And that's in hopes of opening up new southbound pavement from Business 77 down to the south end of the project. Once we get traffic moved there, we're expecting probably within a few months of that switch to have the entire southbound direction on new pavement from one end of the project to the other. So again, as those switches happen, there's going to be some changes to both permanent and temporary ramps. We'll be sure to get public information out as that occurs. But that's kind of the bulk of it right now. So I'll open it up. Are there any questions or comments about the project?
Clayton, when is the current scheduled completion for the overall 4B project?
Substantial completion right now, we're looking at a late 2022, early 23 date.
Thank you.
Hey, Clayton, this is Hector. I have a question about the communications portion. As you begin to disseminate information about which roads are opening again and which ones will be closing, and I apologize if you are doing this already, but any thought on actually getting that information out in Spanish as well?
We've got a public outreach team, CDMP. They had been putting out some bilingual information. I will double check with them though, and as we get out these releases for these upcoming traffic switch and the opening and closing of any exits, I'll make sure that's included as well. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you. I see the English part, like on the English news stations or even some of the radio stations. I think it would be beneficial maybe if we can get it on some of the Spanish news stations as well. I just to make sure that our entire population understands and is fully aware of the openings and closings.
Sure. Like I said, I'll visit with CDMP. I know as we were doing a lot of the utility work, there's a lot of service disruptions there, and they were putting out information both in English and Spanish there. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else have any questions for Clayton? Clayton, we appreciate your updates, and we'll see you next time. Moving on to agenda item 6, director's report. Chris, take it away.
Okay, thanks. So first, the next meeting is proposed for January 21st, which is the third Thursday of 2021, of January 2021. If we go in the next slide. We got permission from TxDOT TP&P division to move forward with our long-awaited amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program. And so what that means is that the proposed changes they feel are in keeping with the new fiscal constraint for that document. So we'll be going to public involvement shortly after the New Year's holiday and bringing that to you finally for action then. Also, we're going to be bringing you some adjustments the state has made to their pavement and bridge condition targets for the year 2022. And that has some implications for our region. If you may remember, we voted to, or we chose to support the state targets. So we need to make sure that those revised targets are still okay with us. And then, of course, we'll continue with TxDOT's update on highway construction. Finally, there are a couple of travel surveys that TxDOT's going to be conducting over the next year within our region. One is an establishment travel survey, and the other is a household travel survey. These are very important to the MPO to support the development of our travel demand model. And that model is pretty important in identifying project priorities for our planning process. This is one of the more important tools that we use to understand what future traffic volumes are going to look like, both if we do nothing at all and also with the proposed improvements that are part of our plans and programs. This year we have the added challenge of COVID-19, and so these surveys are also going to give us a little bit better idea of how travel patterns may have changed, both in the short term and maybe more long term as a result of COVID. And then we do have some contact information here as well. There's probably going to be about 1,500 households that are going to be contacted. And then about 300 businesses contacted, and it's totally voluntary. But you may get some questions from folks as they start, as TxDOT starts recruiting folks for these surveys. Any of these folks are appropriate to forward to them, but if you want to forward them to MPO staff or to Jake Smith at the district, we can get them in touch with the right folks as well. And so we just wanted to make you aware that this was going to be taking place shortly.
Chris,
and that, yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Oh, do we know when people should start receiving the survey? And you know, like its length, what typical questions that are on. Do we know any of that information?
So they should be starting to contact folks very shortly. In fact, they may have already started contacting some of the establishments for the establishment travel survey. But it's they hope to have everyone on board by the end of January, and then it lasts about a year in duration. And there's an app that they would be given access to answer their question or to answer the questions. And it's basically what we're interested in is knowing, how did you travel today? What destinations did you go to, and how did you get there? And so it is a little bit detailed information.
Chris, how often do these surveys take place?
These are supposed to be done once a decade. The last time these were done for the Waco region were actually around 2006. So we're a little behind schedule.
So a few things have happened.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Chris on the travel survey or any item on the director's report? Okay, Chris, thanks for your report and you and your staff's hard work. With that being said, we'll move on to item number 7, which is adjournment. I hereby adjourn the MPO meeting at 2:26 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great break. Take care.